Welcome to episode 6 of Tracking the Lost Vaudevillian.
I'm Shannon Applegate.
And I'm Daniel Robertson. We're still husband and wife.
Even after traveling 7,000 miles doing research on a vaudeville tour undertaken in 1908
by Shannon's distant relative, Harry Clinton Sawyer, the Lost Vaudevillian.
Or maybe we're the ones not looking hard enough and he wasn't lost at all.
But surely forgotten and ignored.
Even by his family.
Until now.
The date book in his vaudeville trunk says he traveled into the American South to perform his impersonations of female impersonators.
How Shakespearean of him. So we've turned down south now.
And started this part of the trip in Memphis, Tennessee, home of the blues and famous Beale Street. But when we arrived, the sky wasn't blue, and there was no music to be heard.
It wasn't a business day, I guess. Everything was quiet and slow as we walked the wide and stately boulevards of downtown Memphis.
On the intersection of South Main and Beale, the old Orpheum Theater, with its gorgeous 2,000-plus auditorium seating, still stands.
It was built in 1928, 10 years after Harry's visit. He didn't perform there.
Well, where did he perform then? Maybe he played at the Majestic, we thought, as we lunched in the theater converted to the Majestic Cafe, which still contained a few original architectural features of the old days.
Plus numerous historic photos were on display on the walls.
Earlier, the historic newspapers we'd scanned didn't shed any light on the whereabouts of Harry's actual performance.
But surely he worked in one of the dozens of theaters that were flourishing in Memphis in 1908. We made our way back to our parking place. Luckily, it was an off day.
Daniel plugged 2 parking meters, not too far from Beale Street.
Usually, we risk life and limb driving, looking for a safe space for our big rig, Moby, especially in larger cities.
Ubers and taxis have been out of our budget range ever since we found out the truth of the matter in Butte, Montana. We couldn't afford to keep doing that.
Parking is a big worry, however.
It strikes me that maybe this would be a good time to talk about the little dust-up in Arkansas Hot Springs.
I think not.
Well, it's relevant. It was about parking when you had that little thing happen with the back of the RV in that guy's brand new black Chevrolet.
Okay.
Stevie Joe was his name.
Let's just skip it.
Okay. In the case of Memphis, we satisfied ourselves by just walking around the old theater district. The museums and libraries weren't open.
You can't have everything on Sundays and Mondays. They're tricky. On a long road trip,
even when you try your best to schedule in advance, which you do a very good job at.
But hey, we were calling this episode Arkansas Traveler. Let's get going. So long, Memphis.
Well, maybe you don't know why I wanted that title.
No.
Well, Arkansas Traveler was a favorite song in the era of minstrel shows. Supposedly, it was inspired when a certain Southern colonel, Colonel Sandy Faulkner, stumbled into an Arkansas squatter's cabin where an old man was sitting on the porch with his fiddle. Minstrel shows loved that song. They immediately picked it up. You could hear it everywhere. It was a hit.
There were rarely black performers in those minstrel shows.
Just white men who used burnt cork to darken their faces, often grotesquely. They did comedy and banjo jokes and all of those things about Mr. Bones.
Caricatures of African Americans.
The songs were actually written by white men.
Vaudeville had some of its roots in minstrelsy. Harry Clinton Sawyer likely saw some minstrel shows when he was a kid in Indiana in the 1880s and 1890s.
Minstrel tours were incredibly popular and incredibly demeaning.
That's where the character Jim Crow developed, isn't it?
Yes, Jim Crow, portrayed as a happy-go-lucky plantation slave in country overhauls. His urban counterpart was Zip Coon, a garish dresser. They were both incredible cliches.
Any kid bitten by the entertainment bug knew about minstrel shows, and these insulting caricatures were well known.
Sad to say, Harry Clinton Sawyer was no exception, but we digress again.
Not really. Historic Arkansas was full of racism, and we saw a few billboards on this trip which confirmed its existence today, even in places we enjoyed, like the resort of Arkansas Hot Springs, where Harry toured, incidentally.
Wait a minute. We're not going to talk about blackface?
Well, Harry didn't do blackface, but he did sing sentimental Coonjine ballads.
But not in 1908. I guess that's why we're not going into it. Remember, we're trying to stick to the podcast subject. The book will delve into much more things like race and ethnicity, important topics in vaudeville and, in fact, in American entertainment in general. And, of course, there are the particular issues of gender and drag during Harry's lifetime. Okay, Arkansas traveler, we stopped in
Arkansas Hot Springs. In 1908, Arkansas Hot Springs was hopping with theatergoers, a big vaudeville and opera house town with the top performers of the day.
Well, let's hope that Harry took some time to soak up the waters.
Aren't you going to say something about Arkansas Hot Springs? After all, it was another U.S. first.
You and your firsts. Well, okay. It's true. Arkansas Hot Spring even predates Yellowstone in terms of something special in our environment being preserved by the federal government. And that was way back in 1832.
It became a national park.
Harry may have soaked in the bathhouses in the hot springs, but where the heck did he perform?
Like in Memphis, we couldn't track him. Or Muskogee and Suwanee, Oklahoma, where we also scoured museums' newspaper files. Where exactly was Harry?
But we absolutely have documented Harry at the Lyric Theater in Fort Smith, Arkansas, exactly as he noted in his date book. So you have to trust that as a primary source. But then we've got to follow through as good researchers and historians and make sure that what he said was accurate. Well, why do you think we're missing spots? No tracks other than his own notations, no ads, reviews.
There was the fact that almost all of Oklahoma was underwater in the spring of 1908, exactly at the time Harry was to perform in Muskogee and Suwanee. Rails were washed out, backing up trains clear to Chicago.
Like an airline disruption today, in a way.
Maybe Harry got stranded in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Well, if we hadn't been reading newspapers of that era, we would never have seen some of these great details which help us to make a bigger context so that we can deduce things and extrapolate a little bit in an honest and authentic way.
Remember the newspaper snippet apologizing for not advertising?
Yeah, they didn't tell the exact nature of the acts that were expected. We know that Harry did a number of one- and two-night stands. The paper sort of excuses this.
It was in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, wasn't it?
Yeah. Owing to the short time, the performance cannot be as thoroughly advertised as desired. Probably they didn't want to spend a buck. But this paper is able to state the comedy will be worth seeing by all lovers of this class of entertainment. No names given.
Yep, no names.
But you know, it isn't all about pinning down the whereabouts of Harry. Of course that's important. We want that proof. That's why we set out to do this. We thought we had to sort of do a little, as the geologists say and others, ground truthing, actually seeing things. And, as Oregon author Ursula Le Guin said,
it is good to have an end to journey toward, but it is the journey that matters in the end.
And, since we're not done yet, as Robert Frost said, But we have promises to keep and miles to go before we sleep.
Westward we go, on to Denver, Colorado, and Ogden, Utah, where Harry performed in the dark of winter of 1908. And then home.